Hello and welcome to today's press review with me, Carmen Cracknell. Let's take a look at today's front pages here in the UK. The Independent leads its front page reporting on Twitter and Facebook users being warned about the dangers of prejudicing high-profile prosecutions in a historic move designed to make contempt of court laws fit for the social media age. It also features a picture of British Prime Minister David Cameron climbing into a London black cab with the Geely car manufacturing company's chairman, Li Shufu, who intends to operate the taxis in Shanghai. The Guardian leads its front page reporting on Britain's stake in the cross-channel rail operator Eurostar to be sold off under a new £10 billion privatisation programme. It also reports on a committee of MPs challenging the existing system of oversight for the security services by asking the head of the MI5 to justify his claim that the paper has endangered national security by publishing leaks from the former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. The Daily Telegraph leads its front page with reports on David Cameron saying that only when public finances are in surplus, ministers will be able to cut taxes on the middle class, signalling that earners will have to wait until the end of the decade for the tax cuts. It also reports on new figures revealing that almost half of A&E visits in the past year were unnecessary, and features a picture of Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, who helps man the telephones during ICAP's 21st Annual Global Charity Day in the City of London. The Times leads its front page with an interview with a Romanian government minister who says Romanians and Bulgarians should be welcomed with open arms for doing jobs shunned by British workers who would rather live off the welfare state. It also reports that Britain's National Security Advisor will give the all-clear next week to a Chinese telecoms firm that has been blocked by the American and Australian government on national security grounds. Now let's take a look at the top stories in the Middle East. As the Syria crisis deepens, let's take a look at what analysts are saying about the increase of jihadists fighting in Syria. The Independent features an article by defence correspondent Kim Sen-Gupta titled "Syrian Rebels Consider Joining Forces with Regime Troops to Fight Al-Qaeda." Sen-Gupta writes that the head of the opposition's official forces would be willing to join regime troops in the future to drive out Al-Qaeda-linked extremists who have taken over swathes of rebel-held territories. FSA commander Idris said ISIS was very dangerous for the future of Syria and needs to be confronted before it becomes even more powerful. Sen-Gupta writes, one senior Western intelligence official stressed that the Syrian regime's forces must be preserved for the battles ahead against the Islamists and the need to avoid the mistakes made in Iraq and Libya, where the army and police were disbanded with the fall of Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi, allowing terrorist groups to rise in a security vacuum. The official added that Geneva II talks could be the beginning of the formation of an anti-Al-Qaeda front in Syria, along with a negotiated settlement to end the conflict. Sen-Gupta added, what is left of the moderate opposition forces are bitterly critical of Western powers, including Britain, for encouraging people to rise up against the regime but then doing little to help. According to Sen-Gupta, an FSA intelligence dossier estimates that ISIS alone now has 5,500 foreign fighters who form its main backbone in sensitive operations, as well as 2,000 indoctrinated Syrians from the northern part of the country. In addition, there are 15,000 others who provide support to the group. David Ignatius has written an opinion piece for the Daily Star titled "A Second Syrian War Against Al-Qaeda Lies Ahead." Ignatius writes that as Al-Qaeda grows more powerful in Syria, moderate opposition leaders are voicing new interest in a political settlement of the grinding civil war. He writes that the 2-year failure to find an exit is leading to what observers predict could be a humanitarian disaster this winter, with the loss of tens of thousands of lives. Ignatius mentions the FSA report on jihadists, which says ISIS employs the policy of kidnapping in the areas in which it is deployed. Ignatius added, the CIA is said to be training about 200 fighters for Idris each month, though the commander wouldn't acknowledge this support. Ignatius concludes that the two tracks of fighting and negotiating sound good in principle, but the rebels haven't been strong enough to make either approach work, and the US hasn't been ready to provide the necessary additional firepower. There's more support now for a political settlement at Geneva too, but it's clear that even if Assad leaves, a second Syrian war against al-Qaeda is ahead. The Telegraph contains the article "Hundreds of British jihadists in Syria," referring to the more than 300 Britons fighting with jihadist groups in the country. The author Con Cochlin writes that Whitehall considers Syria a greater threat to national security than al-Qaeda heartlands on the Afghan-Pakistan border because of the sheer number of British Islamists heading to the war zone. Intelligence sources told the Telegraph that Britons make up the largest contingent out of about 1,000 Westerners fighting with Islamist groups, while Australia and France each have 200, and that children as young as 16 were travelling to Syria to fight. The author writes, the prospect of hundreds of battle-hardened extremists returning to Britain with sophisticated training and practical experience of bomb-making and weaponry has become a grave cause of concern in recent months. According to the article, a senior Whitehall source said the large number of British Muslims travelling to Syria to wage jihad against the Assad regime is developing into a major security issue for the UK. They are openly associating with Islamist terror groups like al-Qaeda. The source added, Syria is a game changer. We are seeing it every day. You have hundreds of people going to Syria, and if they don't get killed, they get radicalised. British Home Secretary Theresa May has revoked the British passports of 16 dual nationality terrorism suspects, while the head of MI5 called Syria a very attractive place for those who support or sympathise with al-Qaeda ideological's message. A report from French forensic scientists has concluded that the late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat was not the victim of poisoning, countering a Swiss report that found he was probably killed with radioactive polonium. Let's take a look at what analysts are saying. Writing for the Wall Street Journal, Edward J. Epstein says a twist in the tale seems to debunk the poisoning theory, but even an earlier suspicious finding may have had a less than sinister explanation in his article Arafat's Death and the Polonium Mystery. Epstein says the mystery over the death of Yasser Arafat deepened on Tuesday when the results from a French forensic lab that had tested his remains were leaked. Last month, a Swiss lab reported finding evidence of polonium in Arafat's body fluids and saliva, buttressing claims by the Palestinian Authority since his death in 2004 that the Palestinian leader had been poisoned. A later Russian forensic examination was reportedly inconclusive. He adds that now the French have found no evidence that polonium caused his death, attributing Arafat's demise to natural causes, according to Reuters. His widow, Suha Arafat, told reporters in Paris that she was upset by these contradictions. But Mrs. Arafat's own lawyer and a Palestinian Authority official dismissed the reports, signalling yet more chapters to come in the posthumous Arafat saga. He adds that Suha asked scientists to examine contents of Arafat's gym bag, which included clothing and sneakers, as well as a toothbrush. Institute scientists found traces of polonium, specifically polonium-210, an extremely rare radioactive isotope that can be lethal if ingested, on the contents of the gym bag. Since detection of the isotope can be a sign of clandestine nuclear bomb building, its distribution is closely monitored. Epstein states that at the time of Arafat's death, only 5 individuals were known to have been contaminated by lethal doses of polonium, all of them scientists, and none which Arafat could have accidentally come into contact with. He says there are at least 3 different theories that might account for how Arafat might have come in contact with polonium-210. The first theory, and the one that has attracted the most attention, was that he was poisoned by his enemies. Suha Arafat accused the Israel intelligence service, Mossad, of killing her husband by adding polonium to his food or beverages. He says that a second theory is that Arafat's headquarters in Ramallah had been contaminated by a surreptitious listening device planted by an adversary intelligence service. Polonium-210 can be used as a source of energy for an electronic device such as a transmitter. Just 1 gram can produce 140 watts of power. And the final possibility, Epstein says, is that the polonium-210 came from North Korea, which had been acquiring the material in 2004 in preparation for nuclear tests. Yasser Arafat, designated a hero of North Korea by President Kim Il-sung in 1981, made 6 trips to North Korea, and Arafat's associates received covert military assistance from the regime. Such trafficking might have brought members of Arafat's entourage in contact with polonium-210. He concludes that there is no doubt other ways in which Yasser Arafat's quarters could have been tainted by polonium, but however the contamination might have happened, there is no reason to conclude that it was the result of a murder plot. The news on Tuesday threw more cold water on an already implausible theory. Writing for the Los Angeles Times, Mahir Abu Khatir looks at the report in his article, "New Report Casts Doubt on Arafat Poisoning Theory." Abu Khatir says leaks from test results French scientists had conducted added more confusion to the debate over Arafat's death. According to the leaks, widely published by news agencies, the French results did not confirm that Arafat died from poison and suggested that he probably died of natural causes. However, Abu Khatir points out that contradicted earlier conclusions by Swiss experts who found unexpectedly high levels of radioactive polonium-210 and lead-210 in the remains. The Swiss report said the lab results moderately support the proposition that the death was the consequence of poisoning with polonium-210. He adds that a report by a third team consisting of Russian experts did not find sufficient evidence of polonium poisoning, but said more work was needed before drawing a conclusion. Abu Khatir adds that head of a Palestinian committee investigating Arafat's death, Tawfiq Tiawai, refused to comment on the French leaks and said that the Palestinians have not yet received the French report. He adds that Tiawai had earlier said that he was going to announce in his last news conference on Arafat's death the names of the people responsible for it. Global Post takes a look at the Israel reaction at the French findings in their report, French Findings, Arafat Not Poisoned, No Surprise. The Global Post says that Israel said Tuesday it was not surprised that a French investigation into the death of former Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat reportedly found that he died of natural causes. But a Palestinian team that investigated Yasser Arafat's death and the late leader's nephew said it had reservations about the French report. It adds that Arafat's nephew, Nasser al-Qidwa, said that, "Until now, I haven't seen the report, but on principle, any new information about Arafat's death, especially from France, needs to corroborate the first medical report on his death in 2004. Like most other press, it also notes that the French findings differ significantly from those of Swiss scientists who said last month that their research offered some support for the suggestion Arafat was killed by polonium poisoning. It adds that the Swiss team said the test results neither confirmed nor denied polonium was the actual source of his death, although they provided moderate backing for the idea he was poisoned by the rare and highly radioactive element, adding that the quantity of the deadly substance found on his remains pointed to the involvement of a third party. Now let's take a look at the top headlines from international papers. Russia's Moscow Times leads with the headline, 6 years for Bolshoi acid attack dancer. The Washington Post leads their front page with the headline, Detroit eligible for bankruptcy filing. UAE's Gulf News leads its front page with the headline, Mohammed invites citizens to share ideas. And finally, Iran's Tehran Times leads today's paper with the headline, Iran will immediately reach 4 million BPD of oil exports once sanctions lifted. For more updates, please visit levant.tv. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.